Growing up 80s, toys. I was born in the mid-70s. By the time the 80s came, there would be a toy revolution that would rock our world. The 80s had a particular theme of making full cartoon series on TV with accompanying toys and action figures you could beg your parents to buy for you. Toys R Us was one of many toy stores kids were going crazy for. Many toys were spillovers from previous decades, but we remember them well. Do you remember Wheel-O? It was magnetic. That wheel would ride the metal track as you angled it up and down, and it would pick up speed. A lot of speed. We also had Magic Sand. This sand came in a variety of colors and would never get wet. You'd take a glass bowl and fill it with water, and then when you'd pour the sand, it would form these stalagmites of sand that looked like an underwater cave. Talking about water, everybody remembers this ring toss game. The Viewmaster was a toy that came from decades earlier, but every 80s kid had one. How about this Woolly Woolly? I remember these at the local discount store. Those stores always had a section for toys while the adults shopped. You were sure to come away with one of these, or some Silly Putty. Remember? Silly Putty could transfer comic strip images onto itself. Sometimes candy machines also dispensed these sticky hands. They were a lot of fun. Another item you could get from the coin machine was the Parachute Soldier. Cap guns were a lot of fun too. I'm not sure that these are easy to find anymore. Although these had their origins in earlier decades, 80s kids knew them very well. Etch-a-Sketch was very popular as well back then. I remember wanting to know what was inside of mine and trying to crack the seal to find out. Anyone ever do the same? These kaleidoscopes were also around for a while, but 80s kids had them too. Do you remember going to theme parks or the zoo and coming away with one of these? We also had Slinkies, but at my house we only had a few steps. But if you could find tall stairs, you'd be watching it slinky down for a bit longer. Simon was a game that at least one of your friends around the block would have. And the Operation game was a really fun one. The Rubiks Cube was an iconic puzzle game from the 80s. Although it was invented in the 70s, it became a worldwide phenomenon in the 80s. I saw the commercial on Saturday mornings and wanted a Snoopy Snocone machine. The idea of being able to make snow cones at home was undeniable for a kid back then. If you're an 80s kid, you know what this is and what it's for. You needed one to be able to play video games on your TV set. Intellivision came out the same year as Atari. Do you remember? But I'd say the iconic video game console was the Atari 2600. We used to play this for hours. Missile Command, Tanks, Space Invaders, Pitfall, and many others. Now this tubular console was the Nintendo. If one kid had one on the block, you all would be over their house playing this. Eventually, just about every kid had a Nintendo. It was awesome. Star Wars action figures were so much fun. Do you remember the large wall of Star Wars figures at the toy store? Remember that feeling of wanting to take them all home? The same thing is true for G.I. Joe. You'd walk into the store and the action figures were sitting on the pegs. It was a rush for an 80s kid. By the time the 80s came around, they had figured out the perfect recipe to market kids to beg their parents for toys. G.I. Joe had a cartoon and so did the Transformers. There was even room for more Transformer-like cartoons such as the GoBots and their accompanying toys. If you'd wake up really early during the week before school, you could catch Voltron cartoons. There were actually two types of Voltron, the Cars and the Lions, and both were sold in stores. He-Man was a popular one, as well as the Thundercats. Do you remember Madballs? Remember Laser Tag? How about the Garbage Pail Kids? Did we miss any toys from the 80s? I know we did. Let me know in the comments and we'll catch you next time.